Ah, uh, hopefully everything's working. uh, I found some music. I won't be able to hear it. Seems loud. Just need it in the background. Um, hopefully this goes well. This is only my, technically my third time streaming in VR. First time in a different game. And I have a completely different setup. But hopefully this all works. Because I can't see my stream elements without opening up a secondary menu in my VR. So, I guess we'll figure it out. I can see chat, and I have notes. The big problem is that you guys are getting a perspective of, I think, my left eye, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, left eye. And I don't know how to make it not do that, so you guys are stuck with my left eye. Okay. We're going to run this as a more, I don't know, educational, I guess, type of stream. Normally, my normal style of the streams are just me rambling. But because we're covering a serious topic, we'll be a little bit more serious. As you can see, we are in a virtual firing range, thanks to hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. Probably one of the best, I'm just going to say, like, firearms related games out there. The creators behind this game care. And so they've done a great job taking real firearms, real rules, everything, and putting it in a virtual world. Don't have to worry about, a lot of the actual stuff that will happen at a real range. So, this will be a good way of handling it. As for me, I'm kind of a no one, so you might ask, oh, why are you qualified to teach this? Good question. Dude using a picture yapping on his screen might not seem like the highest qualification, but in actuality, I am a certified school, like, trained gunsmith. Whoa, my VR's freaking out. That's fun. Hello? Okay. Anyways, so I did go to school for this. Part of it was general firearms knowledge. So I am educated enough, I believe, to educate other people. I'm sure there's other people who, spend more time actually working with the firearms. You might be able to argue that they may have better qualifications. They're not the ones doing this, though, so, you kind of deal with what you have. Other than that, I mean, I do take firearms very seriously. It's something that I've been interested in for a while now, and so, I do think I have a decent understanding and I'm able to communicate a lot of stuff very well. I keep looking over here. You guys can't see it. I keep looking this way because I have notes on a screen that I can see virtually. So, excuse me looking off into a random wall and then up at the ceiling. Whoa, my controls are all messed up. Okay, so this range might look kind of funny. Let me just again show. This is a virtual firearms range. No real weapons here. No one can possibly get hurt. Well, I say no real weapons. I technically have some on my real world desk over there, but whatever. My stream room is also my gunsmithing room, and like I said, I am a professional gunsmith. So, anyways. Those weapons are out of reach. There's no ammo in them. Again, no worries anywhere with that stuff. And that will lead us kind of into how we're going to start this lesson. And it's going to be general firearms safety. So, we can demonstrate this with a real fake gun. A classic 1911, sure. That'll be perfect for this. Okay. So we'll take these over to our virtual shooting desk. So one of the the problem is I'm moving in real life, but my notes are staying where they are because they're not tied to my in-game position. They're tied to my real life position. So now I can see them. So first, you'll generally hear people say that there are 5 rules to firearm safety. They can really be boiled down to don't be stupid with your gun. And you're like, a lot of people who will know will say that's a real oversimplification. But it kind of is the truth. Guns are not toys. They are tools, and they can be very dangerous tools. It's not something you mess around with. It's not something you play around with, because they have the possibility to do some serious damage. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to be scared of them. A lot of people do see firearms as just tools for murder, and that creates a lot of fear in people. But again, they are a tool with a purpose. You should show a certain amount of fear and respect for a chainsaw, a reciprocal saw, a bandsaw, anything that has something moving very quickly can do a lot of damage, especially to the person using it. Firearms are the same way. They can cause a lot of damage to the person using it, to people around the person using it, if they are not taken seriously, and if you do not follow the general safety rules. So, what are those general safety rules? Okay. You should always treat any firearm as if it is loaded. That is the number 1 rule you'll always hear. So what does that mean? It means that you shouldn't take a gun and point it at yourself, point it at other people. You should point it only in a direction where you know that a bullet is not going to hurt someone if you were to accidentally pull the trigger. Now you may say, hey, you just pointed this virtual gun in an unsafe manner, but you'll have noticed earlier that I did in fact check the firearm to make sure it was empty. As a gunsmith, I do have to point guns in unsafe directions, and that means that I have a special obligation to make sure that the firearm is not in a state where it is dangerous to do that. Generally though, again, general rules, don't point a gun at anything that you aren't willing to destroy. That's usually how they term it. Sorry, I got notifications on my watch. So that's the second rule. First one, treat every gun as is loaded. Second, don't point at anything you're not willing to destroy. The next thing is know what is your target and what's beyond your target. Okay, so since this is virtual, I can walk onto the gun range. You should never do this in real life, obviously. So this is my target. You can see it is vaguely human shaped, giving you zones of damage. So we have an A zone here, a zone here, because those are high value targets. B, C, and D. What's beyond my target? Well, because we're in a virtual fake space, it's nothing. So it's really safe here. But in real life, this would be a barrier of material that could stop, lead rounds rated to whatever caliber the range allows. Here, it looks like it's just like a textured, concrete pattern or something. A lot of the times, these barriers will be made out of other stuff, but it doesn't really matter. Again, it's a safety thing, right? You wouldn't operate a machine that has a large rotating spindle. I got a shipping estimate. You wouldn't use any machine that has a large reciprocating blade or anything with loose clothing or gloves, right? I hope this is a analogy that makes sense to people other than me, because that would be dangerous. The loose flying bits can grab you and put you in a situation that you weren't intending to be. So the reason we make sure that we know our target and what's beyond our target is because if you take a gun, again, clear, and you take it, you point it up at the sky and you shoot into nothing, what was your target? Well, there was nothing there, okay? And you might be like, that was safe, that's cool, who cares? Bullet went up, we're all fine and dandy safe. But there's a problem with that. There's this little thing in our world called gravity that means that when a bullet goes up, if it doesn't hit something on its way up, it will come back down. Depending on the gun, that can be very far away. Depending on wind, that can be very far away. Or that can be really close, meaning yourself. So we don't point guns up into the sky and shoot them willy-nilly because we don't know what's beyond our target. trying to think. There's generally 5 rules. I've covered 3. Whoa, my headset messed up again. It might be because I have all this stuff going. But that's kind of like the really important stuff. Again, it's more about, we're not stupid with tools, right? You're not going to swing a chainsaw at someone. You don't swing a gun pointing at someone. Oh, I grabbed the wrong area. You don't point a gun in someone's general direction. And yeah, you know what you're going to hit. You know what's beyond what you're going to hit. And you treat the guns like they are a dangerous weapon, because they are. I can reset this. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to cover in this section before we move on. Again, it's just important to know guns are not toys, but they are not scary, right? You can have a level of respect, and some people might call that level of respect a type of fear for them, but you should know that this gun, as it sits right now with a magazine over here, is nothing more than a very expensive antique hammer. This really can't do anything because there's nothing in it. Not only that it is virtual, but again, it's clear. You can, whatever. And it's safe for me to say that because I've guaranteed that it is in fact clear. You may have heard of, what was it? A couple years ago. There was a movie being filmed, and a gun that was supposedly cleared was picked up, pointed at the camera, and mysteriously an action like that happened, and a bullet went through not only the camera, but a person, and that is why we treat all guns as if they are loaded. We respect them. Again, whoever was there was irresponsible, and so was everyone there was irresponsible, because anytime a gun is anywhere and it's not at a range where it's expecting to be shot, you should check to make sure it's clear, because you do not want this useless hammer to transform into a dangerous gun. And see, look at this. Oh, we're back to the state we were, right? There's a magazine. It's got bullets in it, and it's not in the gun. Look at that. Oh, it's safe. But then, oh, look, yeah, you didn't clear the gun. So, and that's why we treat guns as if they're loaded, unless you're 100% sure otherwise. And even if you're 100% sure, you really shouldn't be waving them around, because it's just bad form. Okay. They're still, like I said, not scary, but you should have a certain amount of respect for them because they can be dangerous. Same as any large tools. If you ever had woodworking class, I'm sure you heard similar stories of all the scary tools they have there. But yeah, so we treat all guns like they're loaded, even if they're not. Let's see if I can. Hopefully that's not too loud. I tried to lower the volume. I guess that's your big test. If that was too loud, my bad. You can let me know. I can try turning the volume down on it, but you can also try turning the volume down on the whole stream, I guess. So, but yeah, so that's where we're starting there. Again, firearms are not inherently evil. They're not inherently scary. But they can be dangerous, so we respect that. What do we got? What do we got next on this list? Since this is something kind of more for beginners, people who don't... come on, my headset's still freaking out. People who don't know that much about firearms... what I'm going to talk about next is ammunition. Yay. Oh, I guess we might be able to go over some basic terminology here, just because it's faster because we have the screen right here. So as you can see, whoa, there is 4 things that come up when I look up ammunition in this level menu. So what are the difference between these? Okay. Magazines. These are what a lot of people will be familiar with. It is what we were messing with that 1911. And you've probably seen them in every video game that had a gun in it ever, because 99% of them use guns that use magazines. So we can pull out the FAMAS one, just because it'll be easy. As you can see, this is a magazine. It is, well, in this case metal, can be made out of other stuff, usually polymer, which is a type of plastic. And it holds cartridges. Hey, look at that. Cartridges are what we call the bullets, because technically bullet is the little shiny, not gold part at the end of the cartridge. But if you say bullet, most people will know what you mean. If they get pedantic on you on that, hit them upside the head. I don't know. That's something stupid to get pedantic about. This is a FAMAS, so it's probably shooting. Where are we looking? Not 600 Magnum. Do we have 5.56? Yeah, there we go. Hey, look at that. Okay. Does that look right? Yay, okay. So, magazine holds cartridges. Cartridges are what actually fires from your gun. They have their case, the bullet, and a primer in the back. And they are very simple. Something hits that little primer in the back, which I don't know if you can see it because I don't know how high resolution this is. That's the little silver part, round silver part back there. That gets hit by some sort of pin in the firearm, causing a small flame to happen inside, fire, lighting the powder inside, which the pressure building makes the bullet actually leave the barrel of the firearm. So we have cartridges held by magazines. And you may hear a lot of the time, you may also hear the term clip, which is this. You can see this also holds rounds, similar to this magazine. Warranty, not our problem. You can buy replacement parts, but we don't know what part you need to replace in order to fix this issue. And I said, cool, amazing, thank you, fantastic. Oh, and the floor is too high now for some reason. Why is my floor messed up? It's probably because my headset just disconnected. Whatever. Everything's falling. It's fine. We can go back and spawn new ones. Okay. So let's pull out a clip. This one's in 303 British. Doesn't really matter. Again, similar. You can tell. It is a piece of metal that has a slot where the rounds can sit. Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, yeah. Disconnecting again. These basically serve the same purpose as a magazine. They help you quickly put bullets back into your gun because, you know, really old guns. Let's see. Do they have black powder? I think they do. Yeah, muzzle loading. We can just see. I don't need to spawn it. We can see here from what it comes with. There's the firearm. There is a wad, which is, you know, a flammable substance for whatever. We have flammable powder, ball. You stick the ball in there. You light the powder using the hammer in the back. It builds pressure and flies out. We simplified that to a cartridge, and it allows more pressure, more power, and overall just has worked better. The other thing you might see here, speed loaders. These are sort of antiquated at this point. Oh, this is a really small one. That might not be good for an example. I should have looked at the size. 44 Magnum is better. These are specifically for revolvers, hence their round shape. And you might recognize revolvers. Those are pretty common in games. Do we have a 44 Magnum here? I would love if my stuff stopped breaking. That's 454 Cazul, 357, 410. That's gonna be too old. That's way too old. It doesn't really matter, cause there we go, 44 Magnum. There we go. Okay. Yeah, revolver. You see, cylinder comes out. You take this, you go, and then, I mean, to be safe, you should gently put it back, but because this is a video game, I can slam it. That's the wrong thing. There we go. This is a lot louder. Again, hopefully, I adjusted for that properly. I haven't been paying attention to my shots. Yeah, okay. So that's what speed loaders are for. Again, revolvers are from a time period a little before magazines. So that's why they existed. It was another way to solve the same problem as speed loaders. It's just that guns could only hold so many bullets. As in the revolver's case, it can hold 5. Most, let's see, where is, oh no, I'm in the right screen. Let's see. Wouldn't be a bolt action. I'm trying to think where this would be. Battle rifle, maybe? No, it's gonna be probably an assault rifle, right? And these designation terms don't really mean much. It's because guns are useful for taking enemy players out of the match, we'll say. Militaries have made designations for them. They don't mean that much, like a battle rifle versus an assault rifle. Usually that's just a difference of cartridge and barrel length. You may hear these terms thrown around fairly frequently. It doesn't really mean that much. Not that big of a deal. There's not that much difference. Most of them operate on the same principles. And doesn't really change much about your basic understanding of firearms. Again, there's a lot of pedantry in the firearms world. Mostly, I don't know if there's really a good reason for it, I guess. A lot of it has to do with just because people like classifying things. Like assault rifle versus carbine. Okay, so an assault rifle, let's see. Do they have... I wasn't paying attention when I was looking before. There you go, the M16, the scary one. Everyone hates the M16, except for everyone who loves the M16. Okay, M16, right? We go to carbines. Oh, where is it? I'm sure it's here. M4. Hey, look at that. Okay, so the M4 and the M16 are basically the exact same thing. The only difference is that the barrel length is a lot smaller on a carbine versus an assault rifle. Like that's literally the only difference between those two categories. So, again, pedantry. Battle rifles, you can see there's a lot less of them. These are... This is what I was looking for before to talk about clips. These are a lot older. There's not a lot of militaries that use battle rifles anymore. Mostly because it was discovered that you can get basically the same power. Ooh, that would have slammed my thumb. You can get basically the same level of kill factor, I guess, with a smaller cartridge, as you can with one that's this large. And I can do a cartridge comparison for you. So again, these shoot way smaller bullets. The These ones also happen to be machine guns, which is another term that might be confusing for people, but again, firearms are a rabbit hole you can fall down. Again, like personal defense weapons, they're smaller. Submachine guns, almost the same thing. Again, this mostly does with cartridge, so the categories are not as defined as people like to pretend they are. And a lot of that actually has to do with, and I'm going to try to keep this more general. You do not have to be someone from the US to know this stuff or to understand this stuff. But a lot of these categories that you'll see here are because US firearms laws and because the US is the largest purchaser of firearms. Right? So a lot of these categories exist either to circumvent or because directly there was some kind of introduction law. Does this work? Oh, yeah, cool. Sorry. Some sort of law, right? So what we see a lot is that these categories, okay, so these ones are mostly due to military pedantry. Stuff like this, also, these ones, also mostly pedantry. Submachine guns are a machine gun that shoots sub-calibers, the small bullet, very complex. Whereas, you know, a normal machine gun, which do they have something just called machine guns? Not really, because machine guns always fall into these other categories. But like I was showing you, the M16 is a machine gun, right? So what makes it a machine gun? It fire bullet fast. Right? So almost forgot what the bolt was. I've been using bolt actions. Ready? Single fire. One more click. Machine gun. Okay, that's full auto. That's why they call it a machine gun. Sometimes you'll hear it called automatic. That's a gray term in firearms because it's used for many things. And it just gets confusing, okay? Where was I in my list? I kind of went off. I started talking about bullets and then I forgot. So there is a lot of bullets. Most of these exist because somebody wanted to make a lot of money. And the easiest way to do that is to create a unique bullet that a government would then need to buy exclusively from you in order to use your brand new amazing weapon system, right? So like, why is there so many 300 blackouts? 300 blackout is actually made for the consumer market. Oh, this is a penetrating tip. It's mostly made for the consumer market. It was actually designed mostly for hunting, and you'll see that a lot with cartridges. It's either it was made specifically in order to convince the military to move over to it in a way to get more money out of a government contract, which doesn't usually work out for companies. Or you'll see it filling some kind of niche, right? So here we have 3006, or as you most likely hear it most of the time, 30-06. Not particularly confusing, literally, as you can read here. It is .30-06. The part about bullets that usually gets people is that they are measured in multiple ways, okay? So let's see if I can find an example. Well, okay, we can do this as an example, right? 300 blackout, the .300, that is in imperial, that's inches, because it is an American cartridge made for the American consumer market. 30-06, also an American cartridge made for the American market, mostly for hunting. 308, again, an American cartridge made for the American market. Let's see, I mean, 338 Lapua, I think that's a European one. I'm trying to find something that's more obviously measured in, well, we can do these too, right? 45 ACP. Spawn this. Where did that go? Hey, there it is. American cartridge, made for the American market before World War II. So it's old. It's still around. People still like it. And it's direct European. Well, actually, probably the most direct European competitor would probably be 10 millimeter. But 10 millimeter is technically an American cartridge also. It's just measured in millimeters because sometimes we do that here too. It's funny, I guess, for us to do both. So as you can see, whoa, very similar. This one's a little chunkier. This one's a little thinner. The most common that you'll find from Europe that has become extremely popular in the US and is why a lot of our pistol cartridges, are measured in millimeters is, let's see if we can actually have it here. It's 9 millimeter. I don't need to keep that secret. Often referred to 9 millimeter Luger, just 9 millimeter, 9x19, 9x19 Parabellum. It's all the same stuff. The reason we specify 9x19 is because at one point some Russian decided that it would be really cool to also make a 9 millimeter that isn't compatible with the other 9 millimeter. I think they were technically developed around the same time. So I don't think it was directly designed to be hostile. Here's 9x18, which, yeah, 9x19 though. This is the most common. I think it was this one, because I did not have a steel jacket here before, but this one appears to be a steel jacket. Okay. You can see, again, oops, put that in my inventory. All these bullets are really similar. They do matter. Your gun will be marked, your firearm will be marked in its caliber, and you generally should stick with that. There's been multiple times where an American cartridge, let's see if I can find this. I don't know if they would have both marked, though. Probably not in this game. I assume probably not. Something like 5.56 here. This is what we were shooting out of the AR earlier. Remington, 5.56 NATO and 223 Remington are technically the exact same cartridge. That is debated by some people, but they're the same. 223 was designed by an American company for the American military, but at the time the American military was trying to standardize with the rest of NATO in an attempt to make it so that all of the allied countries use the same cartridges, makes logistics easier, supplies easier, blah blah blah. But America fell in love with the 223, and so they adopted it for their firearms, and it is literally the exact same as 5.56 because they just took it and put the European numbers on it so that the Europeans wouldn't complain about having to use metric, and now we have two names for the same cartridge. It's happened a couple times. I think it's 308 is the same as NATO 7.62. There's a couple 7.62s though, so I might be getting that mixed up. I believe 308 and 7.62 though. 7.62 NATO. There is a 7.62 Russian. Can't remember the acronym or the what is added at the end of that, but yeah. And again, a lot of the time cartridges were made because, well, there's two methods behind older cartridges we don't see as much anymore. Because most of our modern cartridges are specifically designed for easy compatibility with our allied countries. The reason Russia uses a different 9mm and a different 7.62 is because they wanted to avoid the compatibility so that if a Russian troop gets injured and their weapons get captured, the enemy does not have an immediate means to use those weapons. And that's a lot of older cartridges. So when we were looking at this list here, you could see like there was Swedish and, you know, other countries that were labeled specifically for their special versions of cartridges here. A lot of those are more modern names in order to help better distinguish these cartridges. A lot of the time, like in Russia, you're probably not going to find any guns shooting 7.62 NATO. So if they say a caliber is 7.62, they're most likely referring to Russian 7.62. In the U.S., we do have a lot of firearms that shoot both 7.62 NATO and 7.62 Russian, and so we do have to make those distinguishing. We have to distinguish those. But you can see stuff like here, like right, 7.63 Mauser, 7.92 Kurz, and again, those are because a country developed that gun and they developed an ammunition that would work with that gun, and eventually those firearms fell into the civilian market, most likely because the militaries were upgrading and they got imported to the U.S. They had to specify because there's a ton of guns that use calibers that are very similar, and that's where those designation comes from. Mostly because people hate saying the full name, 7.62 by 54, like 9 by 19. It's just more annoying than anything. And so a lot of people like giving stuff special names. 7.62 by 51, 7.62 by 54. Yeah, there's an example right there. And again, most of these cartridges, it's pretty easy. The bigger the number in the front, the bigger the actual bullet. That is usually what they're marking, the bullet here. And then the second number is usually the case length. Like the full cartridge length, I guess, not technically the case length. That's not always the case, but generally, if you see something like that, that's what they mean. I can't say that they're always that way because there's some exceptions to that. But for the most part, that's how these cartridges work. Bigger numbers, bigger rounds. Like here, 22. This is 22 long rifle, very small. And you may remember this, this is 300 blackout, huh? What happened to my 5.56? And mostly the confusion comes from the fact that we measure firearms in two different systems. Again, most American cartridges are measured imperial, and European cartridges are measured in metric. And Americans are nice enough to put aside our love for the imperial system every once in a while, just long enough to name bullets. Where's 5.56 so I can show this off properly? I think I went too far. These are 50 BMG, which is way too big. Where the freak is my 5.56, bro? I was just looking at it earlier. 45, 50. Was it really past this? Oh yeah, here we go. Now we're in millimeters. There we go. If you look, the tips are actually about the same diameter. That's because this is measured in imperial. This is measured in imperial. They're both, this one's 0.22. This is 0.223. So even though the cartridges are vastly different, the actual size of the bullet is the same, which is what the first number indicates. Again, it can be confusing, mostly because a lot of people who talk about guns will just throw numbers. Like they might say, oh yeah, this gun's 50 BMG. And you're like, what the heck is 50 BMG? That's a slap round. Do they have a normal 50 BMG? Whatever, it's fine. 50 BMG is actually half of an inch, because again, imperial. And so 50 BMG is a lot bigger than 0.556, because 0.556 is 0.556 millimeter, or is it 5? It's 5.56, whatever. And 50 BMG is... Eventually figure this out. Maybe I'll just have to buy a new headset, and I probably won't buy another Valve Index. because it keeps having issues. Okay. And you may see all of these lists. A lot of these actually are the same. So like, well, 50 Action Express is not the same as 50 BMG, but that's because 50 Action Express is a handgun cartridge, but the bullet diameter is the same. Well, see, exact same. Again, that's how it's measured. The big thing you need to know is whether or not it is using an imperial or metric. Otherwise, you should basically be able to figure out calibers just by number gets bigger, thing gets bigger, right? So, and when I say thing, I do literally mean the bullet, because sometimes you'll find stuff like, where is it? I saw it earlier, 5.7, which is measured in metric, but that is a tiny bullet. It is slightly bigger than 5.56 by 0.2 millimeter. But the actual bullet's a lot smaller. Again, or the actual cartridge is smaller. Again, this mostly has to do with countries making standards. And that's mostly where a lot of confusion comes from with bullets. So that's probably where we're going to stop the bullet discussion. Any questions, obviously, throw them at me. I'll try to help. But this stuff is mostly just confusing because there was no standard for a really long time. And then there suddenly was a standard. And now there's like 100 standards. And so everything has names and everything has blah, blah, blah. And that's why we have 26 pages of cartridges. And a lot of these cartridges are actually the same, like 300 Blackout AP, 300 Blackout, 300 Blackout FMJ. These are all the same cartridge. Oh, shoot. Let me, just to make sure we don't get confused here. 300 AP has a black tip. It's armor piercing. 300 Blackout is the standard. 300 Blackout FMJ is full metal jacket. Just means that the entire end, because bullets are made of lead. You may have heard when people shoot, they say they are throwing lead downrange. That is because the bullet is made of lead. And you may look at this and say, that does not look like lead. And that would be very observant because it is lead coated in copper. I'm not sure if that would be uncoated. Okay, yeah, the tip isn't coated. Lead, copper jacket. Lead, copper jacket. So normal bullets, a lot of the time, they may be partially covered like this. They may have no cover, like 22 I showed earlier. The reason it was gray like that on the tip was because it has no cover. It is plain lead. Full metal jacket means that the covering covers the entire thing, or it's a jacket on the bullet, and it's full metal. No one... you may say that gun people are confusing, but they are nothing if not creative with their names, okay? And then this one's called armor piercing because they replaced the little tip. Instead of being exposed lead, it is a penetrating material that can penetrate armor. Hey, armor piercing, crazy. Incendiary has a different inserted tip, and they do like to color code these because military. I'm sure you can guess what incendiary does. It starts fires. JHP. I'm not sure I know what that is. Jacketed hollow point. Okay, yeah. This one, instead of having a tip, it is indented in the middle. That is so that when it hits something, it butterflies out, causing it to stop. It does a lot more. It grabs a lot more material, meaning the bullet slows down faster. A lot of people like using them for self-defense, blah, 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 blah. Again, we're not going to super get into these because this is kind of more in depth than I really wanted to go in the first place. 300 Blackout Subsonic. This has a black tip that does not necessarily... Oh, no, this is armor penetrating, so there you go. Black tip, armor penetrating. Subsonic means that there is powder in here that lets it shoot. Normally, when you shoot a gun, there is an explosion, and the explosion is sonic, meaning the bullet will go so fast that it will break the sound barrier, creating a sound explosion. Subsonic means that it will not do that. It will fire out of your gun, and there will not be the second explosion from it breaking the sound barrier. And then again, AP is armor penetrator. This one is just called 300 blackout. Oh, 300 blackout subsonic full metal jacket. Again, I've explained these. Don't see this. You probably won't even see full metal or like hollow, any of that stuff. Very unlikely that you'll see it, mostly because they didn't produce stuff like that back then. Let's see, subsonic jacketed hollow point. Tracers. Can I grab it? Hello? There we go. You see this one has a red tip. Red tip doesn't always mean tracer. There is green tracers too. They have a material coated on the end that will allow you to see where the bullet's going. In a lot of video games, you may recognize that there's like a trail following your bullet. That's what tracers do in real life. In real life, if you shoot a gun, let me see. Probably be better with a bolt action, just because it's slow. Springfield 1903, no. I don't know if any of these bolt actions have tracers though. 338 Lapua. Do we have 338 Lapua tracers? Incendiary tracers. Okay. Okay, cool. We can show an example then. It's this one, right? Okay. So as an example, in real life, hopefully I know how to use this gun. Yeah, it's a bolt action. Okay. In real life, when you shoot a gun, oh, whoops, safety. You can't really see anything, right? Because gun fast. Bullet fast, kind of hard to see. With a tracer round, hopefully this demonstrates well. Yeah, it went red and then exploded red. It allows you to see where you're hitting and trace your rounds. And yeah, again, Firearms, not the most creative names, but we make up for it with quantity, confusing quantity. But yeah, so that's kind of the differences. Again, magazines are these metal encapsulating. They will hold bullets in a nice shape like this. Clips hold bullets, but only by the ends. And speed loaders also only hold these bullets by the ends, but they're for revolvers. And then, yeah, that was maybe a confusing description. Hopefully not. How do I go back now? Oh, I was in cartridges, right? And again, a lot of these 228 British or 28 British. This is an old obsolete cartridge. The British do not use .28 anymore. I do believe these were using Imperial at the time, though. Maybe not. It's pretty big. But yeah. Actually, if they're .28, they would be close to 300, so I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I think they were using Imperial at the time. But yeah, that's basic gist of calibers. Now here, I did have different action types. And this might be a little in the weeds, but we've kind of got into the weeds anyways. The EM2 assault rifle. See, I wouldn't claim to be a historian of firearms, so that is useful information. I just know that, like, you're not going on the shelf finding 208 British or 28 British, at least commonly, and mostly because there's not a lot of guns that use it. So, going into action types, I mean, we can kind of see the list here. It's not the easiest thing to discuss in VR because I can't really demonstrate fully how these work. And I also don't have all of the actions memorized. Now, when people say actions, they could be referring to two things. Like we're saying here, like a lever action. This is a gun that you manipulate a lever to manipulate its operating system. So, let's spawn this real fast. This is a kind of crappy example. How do you... The problem is... I don't remember how to do this in this game. But to operate this gun, you have to pull this lever down. That will cause the shell to extract, eject, and then put your new shell in. You can see it right there. And I would demonstrate that, but I'm bad at remembering how to do stuff in this game. I did technically partially demonstrate it there, but that's not how you're supposed to do it. In fact, that's not really good for lever actions to do them that way. So yeah, a lot of the time when people talk about actions, for lever actions, you hold with both hands and push your firing hand forward. See, I thought I tried that. Oh, no, I guess I'm stupid. Okay. Well, I guess I can demonstrate it then. So we take a shell. I'm only going to shoot one shot anyways. We load it. Hey, look. We grab it. Didn't count. What? We're going to... See, I'm just being... Oh, wait, I have it loaded. That's why. Obviously. I had it cocked. Yeah. Oh. My VR is messing up too, so now this is permanently attached to my hand. There you go. There is a couple of, like, again, when people are talking about actions, they could mean multiple things. Mostly, you'll hear, like, lever action, pump action. But this could also be referring to... trying to think of the best way to put this. Bolt action too. And these are all how the firearm loads new cartridges in, right? So on a bolt action, like I demonstrated kind of earlier, you can manipulate the bolt. But if you're more in the weeds, thanks. If you're more in the weeds, you might recognize that there's different types of bolt actions. That's probably getting too far into a beginner lesson, and even though I work on firearms, I mostly work on more modern stuff, and pretty much everything is some form of bolt blowback, gas operated. So once we start getting into this older stuff, it definitely gets more into the weeds. For beginner stuff, you probably don't really need to know the difference between different types of bolt action systems. Or, I don't think there's actually... I don't know if we make distinctions in lever actions. Pumps don't usually have much distinguishing features either. It's a pump action. It mostly comes with... once we start getting into these more advanced rifles, they'll be like piston-driven, blowback. It gets complicated fast. I would have to have like an actual list probably, because I am not good enough at remembering things to remember all the different categories. Again, looking at a list I have written up here of other stuff. I had a thing here about firearm naming conventions. Again, naming conventions are a weird one, because there isn't really standards. Generally speaking, there's standards for smaller groups, right? So if we go to assault rifles, the M16 is the 16th military assault rifle. A1 is a variant, A2 is a variant, A3 is a variant, A4 is a variant. Once the U.S. military switched to carbines, they went to the... I saw the M4 in here before. The M4, they have the M4A1. You'll see similar stuff. FAMAS F1 versus G2. There's a normal M4 carbine. When it comes to other names, a lot of the time it will be company and caliber. Sometimes it'll be how many guns the company has made before. With things like, where is Glock? The Glock 17, it's named that because it was the 17th patent that Glock had produced. Same with the Glock 19, the 19th patent. Trying to think what other examples do we have. 1911s were named for the year they were adopted. And then the A1 is just a variant of that. Is the standard 1911. Um, yeah, a lot of the times you'll find firearms are named in just these couple of ways. But like there is no limits to how you can name a firearm. So Desert Eagle 50 AE is a Desert Eagle. Well, this one's a long slide, but the classic is fine. Long slide is literally referring to the size of the slide. I guess I can demonstrate that. Oh, tried to grab it, but it didn't work. But we can, not tutorials, spawn object. Yeah, just as a visual demonstration. Desert Eagle long slide. The slide is long. But yeah, so firearm names are something very difficult because, again, there really isn't a standard. With military stuff, you will find some standardization, but that's because they're military. They prefer to have some way of tracing things. Oh, they have Zip 22s in this game. But once you get into like the consumer market, especially, a lot of the time you'll see some reference to the caliber or the manufacturer, and that's mostly what you get for names. This game kind of avoids full brand names, which every game does because, yes. But yeah, that's not an easy thing to talk about, so that suggestion is a little bit difficult to go over. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, that mostly covers names. Again, a lot of the time, companies can just name stuff whatever they want. That's true, yeah. Civilian versus military naming conventions. And a lot of the time that does have to do with that technically the civilian name is the correct name for the firearm, and that the military designation just comes later for their records, and those can backtrack back and forth. I kind of talked about that earlier with the M16s, because the M16 is a military designation for the Colt pattern AR-15 rifle, and that can be argued. Some people like to argue that the AR-15 is different from the M16 because M16 is fully automatic, the AR-15 isn't fully automatic. But realistically speaking, the original AR-15s produced by both Armalite, which is the company who produced the original design, and then Colt, who bought the patents off of them, were fully automatic. And Colt decided to start naming the non-sporter versions M16s even on the consumer market until machine guns were quote-unquote outlawed. Yeah. But realistically, they're the same firearm. So the same thing with the M4. This is just a designation for the marks or the carbine version of the M16 or the AR-15. How do I keep losing these in this menu? I feel like I'm going crazy whenever I open the carbine menu specifically. I mean, there's an M4A1. I mean, it's the same thing, whatever. Yeah. Again, like I said earlier, I mean, if you look at them, they're pretty much the same gun. Slight differences. You'll see a lot of the revisions, too, change that. But overall, a lot of the times when a gun does have two names, it's because there's a consumer name that's most likely the manufacturer name, and then the military adopts it and gives it the military designation name. Both names are technically correct, but I'm sure there will probably be a lot of sticklers who would say, like in your example with the P320 and the M17, that it's not an M17 unless it was military issued. I think SIG sold some P320s as M17s, so I don't know how that would work to a lot of people. A lot of the times they are marked. I don't know if they are in this game. and I can't read because my VR headset's messed up. But with military designation contract stuff, yeah, M17, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing like the M4, right? That when it gets military designation, they give it the number. Like the M16 was the 16th rifle. The M4 is the 4th carbine. M17 is the 17th pistol. But yeah, it's those designations don't mean as much really because they're the same. It's mostly just because of military. So names are always, I mean, yeah, names can be anything. You could make a brand new gun and name it the Butt Sniffer 10,000 and everyone would just have to accept that that gun's called the Butt Sniffer 10,000. So names are something that you can't super go into. A lot of the times there'll be a lot of older guns or something like this, the 1860 lever action. Most of these would have had a brand name in front of them. Winchester. I think Henry in the modern day names their guns with their name and then the model number. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, that's what we'll see a lot of the time with firearm names. The Henry 1860. Well, because Henry is technically a company producing old patents from the man who made them, whose name was Henry. But I think Winchester bought most of his patents. Am I wrong? Winchester or... I think it was Winchester. There's another company it could have been, though. I can't remember right now. It was a similar thing that happened to a lot of John Browning's guns, where a lot of them were completely designed by him, and most of the prototypes were built by him, and then he would sell the designs to one of these large companies who would mass manufacture, edit, and then produce these plans. Like the 1911, you don't see on here, it's not called the Browning 1911. It does use a Browning action, but it's called the 1911 because that's what the military designated it when they introduced the original. You can see, yeah, that they did use the other naming convention when they switched to A1 and stuff. And then that's just a gold version. That's the same. But yeah, it's it can get confusing really fast just because there's so many people who have designs. Sometimes the designs are named after them. Sometimes the designs are named after the company, the caliber. Sometimes the names are a complete random. Like, I mean, High Point. They're the brand name, which the brand is called High Point, and then the caliber. So this is a High Point 380 because it's a High Point that shoots .38, 380 is the ACP. Luger's, Luger is the company name, I believe. If I'm not wrong, that might be wrong actually. Because I might be wrong about that one. I can't actually remember. Again, I'm not. I deal mostly with modern stuff, so once you get to the historical stuff, it's probably better to ask someone who was historical. The creator of the guns, there you go. Because I know AKs, they're named after their creator too, aren't... that might be wrong. The original creator, wasn't it something Kalashnikov, and that's what they're named after? And we can see stuff like that all the time. Again, it really just depends. Like, I think the Max 9 is made by Silencer Co. There's no reference to that here, mostly because, again, modern brands, I'm sure, don't necessarily want their stuff associated anymore, whatever. But yeah, firearm names, here's a good example, the Honey Badger. The company isn't called Honey Badger. Yeah, you can name guns whatever, so it's kind of confusing. Most of the time, generally, if there's numbers in the name, it usually is designating the caliber, sometimes the year, sometimes a patent. That's mostly Glock who does patent. I don't know of anyone, I've never heard of another company who does patents. Well, I'm glad I remembered something. I was like, I don't think the A stood for his name, but I remember that the K was at Kalashnikov, and I thought that was his name. But yeah, you don't really see that with American guns anymore. And I don't. Do you really ever see any guns in the modern day that are named after their creators? I guess Chris Vector, the Vector, that's one, but that's kind of the only one I can think in the modern day that's actually named after the person who theoretically was behind it. I don't know enough about Chris Vector to say that he actually created the system that it uses, the weird buffer delay system that it uses. Are those in this game? I assume they are. I don't know what they'd count as. Submachine gun? Probably not. Hey, there it is. Vector 45. We're gonna... There we go. Where is the charging handle? There we go. Honestly, the most confusing thing about guns is just the tons of different ways that you have to charge them. There's no standard for that either. The Hudson H9. Yeah, it's definitely a different world because, yeah, you really don't see... I mean, yeah, guns just get like number designations mostly, I feel like, in the modern day. You don't really see a lot of specific naming after like creators. I mean, but we haven't seen that in America for a long time either, because like I was saying, most of Browning's designs don't have his name associated with it. They're just, whatever designation they received. I think a lot of them were year designations actually, like the 1911. Browning High Power is a good example of one that was. I think it was it's FN, right? Who Browning worked with in Europe. I think they named a lot of them after him. I guess Americans just don't like crediting people who create stuff. To be fair, though, a lot of modern guns too are all derivative, so it's kind of hard to claim ownership over a design. And maybe that's why we've seen a lack of that in the modern day. Whatever. I'm trying to think. I mean, you maybe could argue Terran Tactical stuff. A lot of those are just modified designs too, but they do label them all TTI and then whatever. But that's still just the brand, not necessarily. Because have they ever created something unique? I don't think so. It's all just, I think they've just mastered, every company has made an M1911 copy at some point. That's probably true. I don't think Glock has. Mostly just because they were a Tupperware company before a firearm company, but yeah, probably most American companies probably have for sure. And that's kind of the interesting thing with firearms in general, right? Is that once the patent expires, anyone can just copy it, especially the systems in it. And that's why we see a lot of derivatives. Every 2011 and actually most, a lot of pistols are derivative of a lot of mechanisms that were in the 1911. You see that a lot with the AR-10 as well, that a lot of piston-driven systems that a lot of modern rifle have are derivative of that. I don't know enough about AKs, but most of the other AKs that I've heard of are derivative systems based off the AK-47. A lot of them are also just scaled systems, though, so that's not really derivative works. But yeah, it's definitely confusing. The worst part is when it's because in the game, I passed it, I think, didn't I? No, maybe not. They call the Glock the G17, right? And this is like a Glock branded Glock, but ever since So like I get why in the game it even makes sense just to call it the, because like this one's probably supposed to be like 3D printed or whatever, right? So then it's like, oh yeah, oh this one's a joke though too. It's got a switch. But yeah, that's why firearm names are really confusing, because there's a million Glock cones out there, and they all have unique names. So like, how do you know, whatever. They'll usually put somewhere that they're Glock compatible, right? Like there was a big company who just released a Glock code not too long ago. I'm trying to think who it was. I can't remember now. But yeah, there's, it's all over the place, man. Let's see, what else do I have on my list here? Naming conventions, that was pretty much that. I covered calibers and fire. Well, I have the question on here: why do so many firearms exist? Because people wanted a piece of the pie. I don't know. It depends a lot of the time, right? Because like most of Browning's inventions were because he was trying to make a better firearm. Probably argue that a lot of firearm innovations were because someone was trying to do something unique, fill a niche. This question's kind of broad in that it's like, why do so many cars exist? Because somebody decided that something wasn't quite right about a car and that there needed to be a new one. I guess in the modern day, you could probably argue that yeah, and that's true too. That like it really just like time and place, right? Why was the Luger created? Because the Germans needed a new pistol. Why was the 1911 created? Because there was an opportunity for a new pistol system that was actually like a better functioning semi-automatic. It's why does stuff get hold is probably a better question, because there's probably millions of firearms designs that have just fallen off the tree. I know this game's usually pretty good about having weird stuff. They probably have some weird stuff in here, but I'd have to actually pay closer attention. Well, I guess the Zip 22 is actually a good example. The Zip 22 is this dumb little gun. It was made by, what company was it? Yeah, the revolvers for performance. And that's why you see a lot of stuff too, because like the reason we saw police departments all move away from revolvers was because other people had moved away from revolvers, right? There's so much advantage to the 1911, which holds, 7 rounds. And you're like, that's not much more than 6, but you can reload it so much faster that it essentially becomes like a whole new level. And going back to the Zip 22, this bankrupted the company who produced it. This dumb little gun, and it's all of its glory, took a company that I believe was relatively successful, and it just like fell apart because they produced this gun. They sold all their other manufacturing just to produce this gun, and then they sold it under budget in hopes that enough people would want it that it'd be able to recoup the loss and help them, pay back all the tooling and stuff that was required to sell it. And it completely flopped. So no one remembers this gun anymore except for weird people who like weird guns. It was a commercial failure. It was not a very good gun. And stuff like that happens. I thought I saw... Oh, it might have been in revolvers, actually. No, that's automatic again. The Dardic. This is a revolver that has magazines, technically. It's an internal magazine, so I don't know how this works in this game. There you go. I just opened it again. Whoops. I don't know if this has a... And this was kind of a unique idea at the time, but it was unreliable and also not as good as just a normal magazine-fed pistol. So it failed. And a lot of firearms just exist because someone wanted to try something. They thought there was going to be a market for it, and there either was or there wasn't. And that's why there's so many firearms, and by extension, so many calibers, because a lot of that has the same thing. Some things are cultural in the U.S. Police departments use very modern semi-auto handguns, but in Japan, police mainly use old snub-nose revolvers. Yeah, and a lot of that is too because Japanese people don't have guns as easily, right? So their police don't really need something that can outmatch someone with something similar, right? If handguns weren't very prevalent here in the U.S., our police probably wouldn't really need semi-automatic handguns either, because you don't have to worry about people outmatching you in your firepower. And the U.S. has multiple sad examples of times where police departments were behind, and it cost people lives. So there's a reason that police like to stay on top of firearms in the modern day. Other questions here. We had some terminology. I have covered a lot of terminology at this point. Can go over some basic terms you may hear, especially if you're like watching videos related to firearms. One of the examples that people had asked about was flagging. And this isn't, it's not a great example because there's no like easy way to show it, but flagging is just like when your barrel, remember how we talked about barrels needing to be in a safe direction? Flagging is when you don't do that. Like if I point this towards myself, I flagged myself. That dangerous, not good. That's flagging. My list is over here still. There's a question about grain in here. Grain can mean a couple of things. A lot of the time when you hear grain, it's specifically referring to actual physical grain of the smokeless powder in the cartridge. It also refers to bullet weight. It's not that important if you're just trying to understand firearms. Just know bigger grain just means heavier, or more power behind it. So like most 5.56, I don't think it's listed here probably, but like a lot of standard 5.56 that you'll find is 55 grain. You can get hotter rounds, which means that they have more powder in them. But yeah, that's mostly what grain is referring to. Never heard it in another context. Does it say here? No. Okay. MOA. That's more of a. It's related to firearms, but it's actually more related to shooting, which I know sounds kind of like a repetitive statement. But MOA is an abbreviation for minute of angle, and it's literally referring to how close your group of bullets are within an angle. And it's usually referring to your optic setup. So like if you have a scope and how well your rifle can shoot. So your scope and your rifle should have a similar accuracy. So if you have something that's sub MOA, it means all your bullets are closer together, usually than like I think it's an inch, right? I'm doing symbols with my hands, you can't see, but yeah, that's usually where MOA is referring to. Because I've just been shooting this at complete random, this isn't really a good target, but I suck at shooting in VR, so you'll have to. Whoa, that's crazy. We good? Okay. That's a minute of angle. We have twist rate. We don't have good examples of that either, I don't think. This would be something easier to demonstrate outside of this game, probably. But twist rate... There's not like a Sharpie or something in this game, is there? I can just write on the wall. That'd be cool. Trying to think of a good way, because I don't think I'm going to be able to demonstrate this in these menus. Yeah. That's what, yeah. 100 yards, your shot would be within 1 MOA. Yeah. And I guess I should have pointed that out. That yeah, I don't know if I said that. They are usually measured at 100 yards. This range only goes to 30, I guess. But yeah, so it's small at 30. At 100, it's even smaller. If your rifle is actually sub MOA capable, you got yourself a good rifle, because I think most are usually more than 1 MOA. Unless like you're spending good money on it. Which, you know, there's lots of people who do. I'm sure there's lots of yeah. And I was gonna get to that. I was just trying to think of a good way to demonstrate it, because with actual like AR-15s on the consumer market, you can buy different twist rate rifles. Now, what is twist rate? A rifle has, and this is why it'd be nice to be able to like draw something. A rifle has, they call them landing grooves. Jeez, my headset's freaking out again. Which is, I just want to draw it out, but it's literally like a square. So imagine if this was a flat, like a circle. So there's an out part and then an in part and then out part, and it's going like that in a circle. So it's a big circle, and there's ups and downs in it. And the rifling is that, the landing grooves, and then the twist rate is how much that spins as it goes down the length of the barrel. So, and my headset's disconnecting again. Whoa. So like on ARs, you can get a 1 in 8 twist rate rifle or a barrel, a 1 in 9, and a 1 in 10. And there is ballistic differences, and it mostly has to do with the length of your barrel. So a carbine has less room to start a spin and less room for that spin to affect the bullet, right? So, and that's just because the barrel length is physically shorter. So having a higher twist rate means that your bullet will get spinning faster in that less amount of time, even if it takes more power to do that, right? Whereas like back to the M16, which is the M16A4, which looks even more similar, which is funny. It has a physically longer barrel, and 5.56 was really designed for these longer barrels. And I think, if I'm not wrong, the M16 has a 1 in 9 twist rate by default. I could be wrong about that. So that's what it was designed for. Going up or down in twist rate can affect your accuracy, your range. But like the chat said, the twist rate is really talking about how it applies to your bullet afterwards, because that twist, much like when you throw a football, helps the bullet continue to go straighter for longer before we start seeing as dramatic effects of gravity taking the bullet down. So those are how those are tied together. I'm trying to think if there's anything. Do I have anything else on my list I want to cover here? We went over magazines and clips, rifling and barrel length. I mean, I kind of just went over that. I don't think we're really going to be able to demonstrate it, but yeah. So when I said that the M16 was designed to have a full-length barrel, I don't know, is this 18 inches? Might be. And that's the legal requirement for the minimum for a rifle here in the U.S., is 18-inch barrel. Again, not really trying to make this U.S. specific, but that is partially where a lot of these definitions come from. Again, because the U.S. is a large purchaser of firearms, and so a lot of our laws kind of become international standards. So one of the laws here in the U.S. is that for it to be legally called a rifle, the barrel has to be at least 18 inches. 18 inches? 16 inches. 18 inches is shotgun, 16 inches for a rifle. But a lot of the people you'll see will say that it should be at least, I believe it's 18. For full ballistics of a 5.56, I think it's actually supposed to be a 20-inch barrel. Which is part of what we see was one of the problems with the carbines here. That they took the barrel and it's a lot shorter. Now I believe are carbines? A lot of carbines are legally rifles. If you go too short on your barrel, in the U.S., legally it would then be considered an SBR, mostly because of the stock. And again, this is just weird U.S. law stuff. An SBR just means a short-barreled rifle, which is still technically a rifle. Yeah, okay. See, I knew I was on something there. The funniest part about that law, and I'm sure you know this, is that it originally was supposed to be 18 inches like shotguns, but the government had sold a bunch of civilians 16-inch rifle length or barrel length rifles to civilians, and they didn't want to have a whole problem. And so they just amended the law so that it was 16 inches for rifles, just so that it wouldn't become like a legal problem afterwards, which is, you know, fantastic and exactly why everyone loves the laws of the U.S. government when it comes to firearms. Anyways, though, shortening the barrel means that there's less time for the bullet to gain twist and for the pressure to build as the bullet is trying to move through the barrel. So shortening your barrel too much will lead to a lot of unburned powder, which means that 14.5 inches for M4s, which would technically make this an SBR then. Which is, again, just a legal designation. Doesn't actually mean anything other than the government wants 200 of your dollars. And the ballistics are slightly different. And again, this really depends on caliber, because a caliber like 300 Blackout, which a lot of ARs can also be chambered in. I'm not going to say a lot, it's not that popular. Have better ballistics at shorter barrel lengths. How much does it matter? It depends. So really, with the shorter barrel length, you're giving up a little bit of range. And that's mostly where you're going to find issues, because you're not burning all your powder. You're going to have powder flying out. You'll probably have bigger fireballs because powder will start burning as it comes out. And again, your bullet will lose velocity, which means it can go less distance. How much does that really matter in the real world? Depends what you're fighting, what you're shooting. And so this is something that, in theory, a lot of discussion and debate can be had on it. For someone just trying to understand firearms, just know that a smaller barrel usually means that the bullets don't go as fast. They can't go as far. There's some... Again, it starts getting more complicated because, like, pistols, like our classic Glock here, the 9x19 Parabellum round or 9x19 Luger uses a hotter powder, which means that even in the shorter barrel, it gets more pressure and can go farther. Obviously, you are fighting friction. You are fighting other rules of nature. So you can only have a barrel so long before you start having negative effects again. A lot of people will say that, as was discussed here, the M14's 14-inch barrel is too short for 5.56 to be effective. Clearly not. The military has used it effectively for a long time here in the U.S. Are they leaving ballistics on the table because they're losing some pressure and some distance? Yes. But clearly these rifles were designed for closer engagements, so that doesn't really matter. Again, a lot of things in firearms are trade-offs, right? So the Desert Eagle, wherever it is, wasn't it at the end? I guess not. Man, how am I so bad at navigating these menus? The Desert Eagle may hit a much harder punch than the Glock 17, but it's a lot easier to carry a Glock 17 on you in case you depend on it. We got another. Even the Mark 18, which with its 10.5-inch barrel, is perfectly capable of several hundred meters. Though that's mainly because 5.56 is just a really good round. And that's true. Again, a lot of this, when it comes to like barrel length affecting your ballistics, a lot of it is a lot of theory. And it's like, sure, if you're trying to take a 1,000-yard shot, it'd be better to have a longer barrel. It'd also be better to have a bigger cartridge. Is that always what you have, and is that always what's available? No. Should you be trying to take shots that long anyways? Probably not. Not unless you're, a trained sniper with the capability and a rifle that's capable of doing it. And I think something that takes over a lot of the U.S. gun market is a lot of wanting to be better than other people. And so it's a lot of snobbery. I don't know how to best put this, but the military can make stupid decisions, but as a whole, it is not stupid, right? The reason they shorten the barrel is because it's easier to walk through a doorway with this shorter barrel than it is with this longer barrel. And because this is VR, it's not the easiest thing to demonstrate, but this barrel can hit something if I'm that close to it, where if I'm holding this one, I mean, like, look how much closer I have to be for this to hit. So this is just easier to maneuver around in small spaces. And they were willing to make the trade-off for a few hundred less yards, which is, these rifles are not being designed for that long of engagements. So, everything kind of works out. And again, it's been shown that a rifle and that's true. That carbines are really a half-step measure for even like PDWs. These are designed to be so small that you can easily carry them. And then, as the comment said, or the chat said, submachine guns. Short. And the barrel is actually a decent length because this is technically a bullpup. Or it is a bullpup. And submachine guns. This game has a decent selection of those too. MP5, yeah. And these are both really good for close quarters. You probably aren't taking them to try to snipe someone because that would be stupid. There's rifles made for that. But yeah, and so a lot of guns, and this kind of goes back to why is there so many guns? They're made for scenarios. They are tools of necessity. And we can see a lot in the U.S. consumer market that we've kind of lost that a little bit because people will just make whatever. Like that Zip 22. My headset disconnected again. Yay. Okay. That Zip 22, it was not made directly from necessity, right? It was kind of a neat idea. It's small and concealable, and it was actually designed to have reverse Picatinny so that you could mount it under another gun. I don't think this game has the reverse Picatinny from what I can tell here. Of course, that changed it to be an SBR, which is, great U.S. laws again. But like, this wasn't something that people needed in the battlefield or in the consumer market, really. And so it kind of flopped. And a lot of guns, the U.S. market is really oversaturated. There's a lot of guns that fill the exact same niche, but a lot of the time they'll fill it in slightly different ways. Trying to think here. The 5.7, believe it's a similar size to the Glock. It's a little bigger. Full-size Glock 17. But it technically has... It does have the attachable version of the zip and the attachment stuff. Oh, it's a different thing? It's going to be an underbarrel weapon. Yeah. There we go. Going back to my 5.7 thing. This is also arguable. It technically holds more rounds that have similar quote-unquote penetration to 9mm. That's been under debate for a while now. So I'm not gonna argue about that. But yeah, there you go. That's a good example. This makes it an SPR. Congratulations, you now have to pay $200 to the U.S. government. But losing my train of thought. That was the use case for the 5.7 in a market of 9mm handguns, right? The cartridges were smaller, so you could hold more of them in a single magazine. Yeah, the Zip 22 was designed to be extremely cheap. It's too bad they produced it too cheap to actually be feasible at the price that they were selling it at. And then also that it was a crappy gun, But that's where the 5.7 fits into the market. It holds more rounds that are theoretically comparable to 9x19. That's also why we saw the Glock take dominance over the 1911. The 1911 holds 7 rounds single stack. 7 rounds is a lot, and you can reload pretty quickly. But would you rather have 7 rounds or 17 for something that's technically more concealable? The U.S. consumer market, more so than not, decided that 17 was better than 7. And a lot of guns are really designed to fill niches. A lot of these small ones were designed to be as tiny, as concealable as possible. Some of these bigger ones were designed to hold or to be more powerful than some of their, contemporaries. Some guns are designed to just be like kind of more range toys, which I feel like maybe some Deagle people will get mad, but most Deagles fall into that category. It's not particularly practical to have a gun that shoots cartridges this large and is also this large, because unless you're open carrying, it's gonna be pretty hard to conceal that. But it wasn't designed to be a concealed carry firearm. Oh, here you go, Glock 19. Glock 19, which was the favorite for a long time, has kind of fallen out of favor recently for even smaller ones. You get slightly less rounds, but in a more concealable package. Right? So again, another trade-off. And that's why a lot of these firearms exist. Like we talked about the High Point before. High Point is bigger than the Glock. Well, I meant this way. Physically, the barrel is bigger. I guess the actual, probably full surface area is probably slightly smaller. It shoots the same rounds. I'll get to that good point in a second. It shoots the same rounds, but it was designed to be as cheap and easy to get as possible. Which there's a market for that too. And unlike the Zip that failed because the company couldn't actually afford to sell them as cheap as they were, the High Points are made to a price point, and so they sell. And the point was brought up here. 9mm started overtaking 45, not because it was cheaper at the time, it is now, but because it was slightly smaller, so you're able to carry more, and it was ballistically good enough that most people would prefer to have way more rounds than what you get in the 7 round of 45, which my 1911 was somewhere. Oh, here it is. So instead of 7 rounds of 45, you get, 17 of 9mm, and that's just as good as putting someone down. And you get more of them. So, a lot of military went that way too, right? The M17, like we were talking about, the P320, is, 13, 14 steps away from the 1911. But the military switched that way Some people might argue partially because because of nepotism. We won't get into that. The military is fine, just like the rest of the U.S. government. Not at all messing with us. The M9, that's a classic. Comment was brought up here too. 9mm has similar, if not better, performance than 45 in some ways, as well as having lighter recoil. And that's a part of the market too. I don't know if they have any here, but there's a lot of smaller guns that shoot like a smaller cartridge, like 380. I'm sure they have one here. 32 ACPs, not the same thing. But there's a lot of people who prefer to shoot 380. This 32 ACP. Because it has lighter recoil. There's smaller guns that are easier to conceal. 38. Is that what I'm thinking of? Am I saying 380 and I'm thinking 38? Maybe I'm going crazy. Oh, 380. I was looking at a 380 before. Anyways. Yeah. You commented before I stupidly realized that I'd been being dumb. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons why guns exist and a lot of reasons why all these different calibers exist. And most of the time it's, yeah, like we were talking about, it's filling niches, right? They have an example here that's probably good. The stamped 1911 prototype. This didn't really make it out of prototype phase, mostly because I believe it was being produced during World War II, and they ended up going with the Liberator, which was a similar idea and even cheaper. But this was just a way to make the 1911 as cheap as possible in order to arm as many people as possible. And you can see they're similar in a lot of ways, and they're different in a lot of ways. But it's a gun that filled a niche, and the niche ended up not needing to be filled the way that it was. And so it never made it out of prototype phase. And there's lots of guns that do make it out of prototype phase because people think that there is a market, and then there ends up not being quite the market that they thought there was. A good example that isn't in the game, that is fairly recent. Last year, a company announced they were going to release a smart gun. There was a lot of debate about that in the firearms community. And supposedly they have released them, though I haven't seen any anywhere. I don't know if you can actually buy them. Supposedly they exist. But I mean, they were thought that there was a niche in the market. Whether or not it exists doesn't really appear to. That could have been due to marketing. It could be because no one actually does want that. And again, for beginners in the firearm world, a lot of this is going into the weeds a lot. But it does kind of have a broader point. That firearms, again, like I said at the beginning, they aren't scary inherently. They should be respected, but they are tools. It might sound weird that there are tools that are specifically designed for how they look, versus, you don't hear about people buying a shovel because it's the fanciest shovel that they could find. Though I'm sure someone has done that. I've never seen a custom engraved shovel either, but part of firearms is that they are legacy items too, right? They can be heirlooms. They've been a part of American culture pretty much since the founding of this nation, and that's why there's a lot of symbolism behind them too. There's a comment here again. The P50 by Kel-Tec. You can buy it, but there's really not a market for an oversized pistol like that other than owning one for the goofiness of it. And there is quite a few people who want to own things because they're goofy. Personally, I would love to get my hands on one of these Zip 22s. I love stupid, dumb guns. They're expensive now because I was a little young when they released and I didn't know about them until later. But I would like to get my hands on one of them eventually. But there's not enough people into these weird, silly ideas that it's like necessarily sustainable. Caltech, yeah, they're Florida. They do what they please, and we respect them for that. Because, you know, at least they're still trying to find those niches, even if they're insane. But yeah, so that's kind of all of the topics I have. Which is kind of crazy. I don't know how long I've been going for. I guess I can check. Ooh, how long? Oh, just about an hour and 47 minutes. The crack that the people at Caltech must be on has some good, given the nutty designs that they come up with. And on a non-firearm related note, I'm pretty sure Florida is the only state that allows cocaine to be used for dentistry. Is it a coincidence then that Caltech is based out of Florida? I'm just saying. Maybe a conspiracy. Maybe not. But yeah, so yeah, firearms are an interesting world, and they're like an infinite deep dive that you can fall into. I'm sure Happy Man 0203 here could attest that there's always more you can find. Even on things that are like well documented, like the 1911, I'm sure there's stuff that isn't as well known as other stuff. Firearms are a complex world. Again, they are tools. They should be respected. They are not scary. A gun cannot hurt you by itself. At worst, a 1911 can be used as a decent bludgeoning tool, just because it is heavy. I guess a Glock probably could too, because the side's decently heavy too. But like, for a lot of people who don't know anything about firearms, something like the MP5 is scary. It shoots fast, and it perceivably can do a lot of damage. But again, firearms are tools. They are not. They cannot hurt you on their own. And that's kind of why I decided I wanted to do something like this, even though it's not in my normal stream style. It does overlap with my real world responsibilities. So I thought I'd be a decent person to tackle it. I'm not as familiar with this game, but I'm glad that someone here was. It could help me out with some of the random stuff I was running into. But yeah, I think it's just important to note that the reason that firearms are so respected here in the U.S. Is mostly just due to our history of needing them. And that might sound kind of scary to a lot of people who don't grow up in a world where they feel that way. Firearms can do a lot of harm if the user wishes to do that harm. And that's true. Again, they are tools. You can do a lot of harm with a knife. You can do a lot of harm with a truck. Does that mean that they are scary inherently? I would say no. But like I was saying, I know that a lot of people don't grow up in a world where firearms are a regular tool that they see. And that can lead to some apprehension. But just know that if operated safely, they are safe. Well, if they're not safe, you have a lawsuit on your hands. But for the most part, if they're well known, they are safe. And again, a lot of people kind of judge the U.S. Due to our civilians' like of firearms. But it just is kind of part of our culture. Whether or not it's a good culture is something that can be debated. I personally do think it is a good culture. For the most part, there's some bad parts of it, but I feel like that could be said about any culture. And it really is just about responsibility, right? Can a firearm in the wrong hands do a lot of damage? Yes. So can a lot of things. Does that mean that we give up freedom for safety? That's a debate you can have with your lawmakers. Personally, in the U.S., I know it has been tried, and it has been denied multiple times. And that's really state dependent. Again, this is not super. We're not getting into the weeds of U.S. firearm law, but just know that firearms themselves, again, are just tools. Like any other tool, they can do good, they can do bad. It depends what you're using them for. The problem is, and again, I don't really want to get into U.S. firearm law politics. There's countries where we see similar stuff, and maybe even some countries where some stuff is more available than here in the U.S. But there really is only so much you can do before you start restricting things. And the U.S. already has some restrictions. Like, it is very difficult to own a machine gun here in the U.S. Some people think it's illegal. It's not technically illegal. They're just hard to get your hands on because you cannot legally produce them anymore. At least in a way that they're easily obtainable. And that's why they demand high prices. I keep messing with this P90. It's a hard thing because there probably is people who shouldn't be allowed to have guns. And I don't think that's necessarily a controversial statement. The way the U.S. Constitution is written means that really everyone who lives in the U.S. should be allowed to own a gun. But there's some people who probably are not mentally capable of that responsibility. What do you do with those people? Do those people negate the rest of the people's ability to follow their rights? It starts getting into more philosophy, and again into U.S. gun law, which isn't the point of this. This was just supposed to be more of a general introduction to try to help people understand, maybe if they watch firearms content but aren't as familiar with firearms. And I did go into the weeds a little bit. I'll probably cut this into a video to upload later, and maybe I'll cut out some of the more weed things. But a lot of it is yeah, I mean, there is cultural problems here in the U.S. that I think lead to a lot more of our gun problems. Mostly just that people think that there are easy targets out there, in my opinion. It's kind of sad, but we know that is what most of the people do. They think there is a place where they can have easy targets, and that is their prerogative. They want to do as much damage as possible. And so they pick places and things that are bad. A lot of the countries that have firearm laws but don't have as many issues, their firearms are more restricted. Here in the U.S., you can own an infinite number of firearms. Well, this might be state dependent, but generally speaking, you can own a significant number of firearms and no one can know except for you and anyone you tell. There are private transfers that mean that you don't have to go through background checks. And as long as the person who's selling it to you thinks that you aren't crazy, you can get your hands on the firearm. Again, there's some states where those laws are different. And that's kind of intentionally built that way. It's a common belief here in the U.S. that firearms, because they are part of our constitutional rights, should not be tracked at all by the federal government. And that leads to cases where people can get their hands on guns who otherwise wouldn't be able to. And that also leads to cases where People who need guns can get them. And the government cannot say who those people are very easily. There is a lot of liability on people who sell their guns to people without any proof of their stability. Mostly just because of how firearm laws work. But yeah, trying not to get too much into that, like I said, which I have already gotten somewhat into it. But that'll probably be this stream. Can't go too much longer. I have stuff I have to do after this. I've kind of run longer than I normally do, even though my time is shorter than I usually do. I started a little late because of having VR issues. But yeah, it's once you start getting into the world of laws, it gets complicated. But like I said, generally firearms are tools. Tools can be used for good and bad. Hopefully, this explanation makes your journey to better understand these tools easier. Hopefully I didn't just leave you more confused. If there is more confusion, asking questions is fine. I'll try to answer as many questions as possible, whether it's in one of the stream chats, which I should be able to see them all, or if I cut this up and put it on YouTube in the chat there, comments there. We can either do another stream or I can just respond in comments. But yeah. Again, this is just supposed to be a beginner course, more or less. Hopefully, better understanding of just a lot of the basics. We didn't cover a lot of the different subcategories of firearm, but again, I feel like that's kind of going into the weeds. Hopefully, the information we gave you is foundational enough that you can understand what's going on. And I think I'll probably call stream here. I do have to figure out what's wrong with my VR headset. Maybe we can do something like this again after I figure that out. Valve was not useful, but we'll figure it out eventually. And yeah, I think that'll be it for stream today. Thank you for anyone who showed up. Thank you, HappyMan0203 for commenting and, corrections and helping me with the game. Really appreciate that. Otherwise, that'll be it. If I can end stream from VR.